There is a kind of person more dangerous than the malicious, more dangerous than the cruel, more dangerous, even, than the enemy who knows he is your enemy. It is the person who has stopped thinking and doesn't know it. In a prison cell in 1943, a German theologian came to a conclusion that should disturb you. He had watched his country, educated, cultured, devout, march into moral catastrophe. And what he concluded was not that evil had triumphed. It was that stupidity had. Not low intelligence, not ignorance. Something else. Something that can infect a professor as easily as a peasant. Something that, he warned, is more dangerous to the good than malice ever could be. This is the story of that idea and why it may be the most important psychological warning of the 20th century. Dietrich Bonhoeffer was a German Lutheran pastor, born into privilege and intellect, surrounded from childhood by philosophers, musicians, and theologians around the family dinner table. He had every reason to believe in the power of reasoned argument. He had watched brilliant minds debate scripture, ethics, and politics with rigor and care. Then he watched those same minds, many of them, go silent, or worse, go along, as the Nazi regime rose around them. By the early 1940s, Bonhoeffer was active in the resistance, eventually implicated in a plot against Hitler's life. In April 1943, he was arrested and imprisoned. It was there, isolated, stripped of his pulpit and his freedom, that he wrote one of his most quietly devastating essays, not on evil, but on stupidity. He wasn't writing about people who lacked education. Many of the most stupid people he had observed, in his sense of the word, were highly trained, articulate, and accomplished. He was describing something that had overtaken an entire society of capable minds, and he needed a new word for it, because the old one, evil, didn't quite fit. Bonhoeffer's central claim was this: stupidity is not a defect of intellect. It is a defect of inner independence. He wrote that stupid people, in his sense, are not unintelligent. They have simply surrendered their independent judgment to the power, the mood, or the crowd around them. The deficiency is not in the mind. It is in the will to think for oneself when thinking for oneself becomes costly. This is why he considered stupidity more dangerous than malice. You can reason with a malicious person, appeal to their self-interest, their fear, their conscience, but you cannot reason with someone who has stopped reasoning. Facts bounce off them. Contradiction doesn't register as contradiction. It registers as attack. The stupid person, he observed, often feels more certain, more righteous, the less examined their position becomes. And this is the unsettling part. He insisted this is not a personal failing of weak individual. It is a sociological phenomenon. It happens to groups. It happens in waves, under certain historical conditions. Otherwise, capable people surrender their independent judgment en masse, not because they are foolish, but because something in the collective atmosphere has made independent thought unbearable, costly, or simply unnecessary. Bonhoeffer noticed that stupidity tends to bloom in the presence of concentrated power, political, social, or cultural, When power asserts itself with enough confidence, something happens to the people beneath it. A portion of their independent judgment, almost imperceptibly, switches off. They don't necessarily believe the power is right. They simply stop checking. A second mechanism is social, not political. Humans are wired for belonging, and belonging has a price: alignment. The mind, faced with the discomfort of disagreeing with everyone around it, will often quietly edit its own perceptions rather than tolerate the loneliness of dissent. This is not cowardice in the dramatic sense. It is something quieter, almost invisible to the person experiencing it. Bonhoeffer observed that under the right pressure, people stop forming their own judgments and instead simply absorb slogans, talking points, and conclusions, adopting them as if they were original thoughts. The tragedy is that the person doing this usually feels more informed, not less. They mistake the borrowed certainty for understanding. Healthy thinking requires friction, doubt, hesitation, the uncomfortable feeling of maybe I'm wrong. Stupidity, in Bonhoeffer's sense, is what happens when that friction disappears. The person moves through ideas the way a stone moves through water, smoothly, without resistance, without leaving a mark. Finally, there is the matter of feedback. The stupid mind becomes immune to correction, not because it refuses correction, but because it no longer recognizes correction as correction. Disagreement is reframed as bias, conspiracy, or hostility. The loop seals itself shut, and from the inside, it feels like clarity. You do not need a totalitarian regime for this mechanism to activate. You need only an environment of strong social pressure, abundant information, and weak incentives for independent thought. And that description fits much of modern life rather precisely. Consider the architecture of the algorithmic feed. It does not ask you to think. It asks you to react. It rewards the fast, confident, emotionally charged response over the slow, uncertain, considered one. Bonhoeffer's stupid person, confident without examination, is, in a sense, the ideal user of many digital platforms, whether they lean in one ideological direction or another. Consider, too, the modern tribalism of identity, political, cultural, even aesthetic. When belonging to a group becomes central to a person's sense of self, disagreeing with that group starts to feel like self-betrayal. The mind, protecting its sense of belonging, simply stops generating the disagreement in the first place. And consider information abundance itself, a strange paradox of our age. Bonhoeffer could not have imagined a world with infinite access to facts. Yet here we are, often more certain and less examined than societies with far less information ever were. More data has not produced more independent thought. In many cases, it has produced more sophisticated ways of avoiding it. Modern psychology gives us language Bonhoeffer didn't have. We now understand the mechanisms he described as cognitive offloading, in-group conformity, and motivated reasoning, well-documented tendencies of the human mind to outsource judgment to trusted sources and to reason toward comfortable conclusions rather than from the evidence. None of this is unique to other people. This is the most important and most uncomfortable implication of Bonhoeffer's idea. Stupidity is not a category of person. It is a state that any mind can enter, including yours, including mine, under the right conditions of pressure, fatigue, fear, or belonging. The philosopher Hannah Arendt, writing in the same period and on similar terrain, described something related. The banality of evil, the way ordinary people commit terrible acts not out of monstrous intent, but out of a kind of unthinking bureaucratic compliance. Bonhoeffer's stupidity and Arendt's banality are, in many ways, two names for the same erosion, the quiet absence of a mind asking, "Is this actually true? And would I think so if no one else agreed with me?" This is why Bonhoeffer wrote, with a kind of grim compassion, that the stupid person should be pitied more than condemned, because in some sense, they are not fully present. Their independent self has gone quiet. They are operating on borrowed certainty, and they often suffer for it without understanding why. Bonhoeffer did not offer a tidy solution. He was writing from a cell, with no guarantee he would survive. But within his observations is a quiet blueprint for resistance. Not political resistance, but psychological resistance. The kind available to anyone, in any era. Number 1, reclaim the pause. Before absorbing a conclusion, ask, did I arrive at this myself? Or did I receive it? The pause between input and belief is where independent thought lives. Number 2, tolerate the discomfort of disagreement. The desire to belong is one of the strongest forces shaping human cognition. Liberation begins with the willingness to feel the discomfort of standing slightly apart, without needing it to resolve immediately. Number 3, treat certainty as a signal to investigate, not relax. The feeling of total certainty is not proof of truth. It is, more often, a sign that an idea has stopped being examined. Suspicion of your own certainty is a form of intellectual hygiene. Number 4, seek friction, not comfort. Deliberately engage with the strongest version of opposing arguments, not the weakest. A mind that only hears agreement is a mind quietly losing its edge. Number 5, notice the source of your conclusions. Did this idea arrive through reasoning or through repetition? Borrowed conclusions, repeated enough times, begin to feel self-generated. Learn to tell the difference. Number 6, protect your inner solitude. Bonhoeffer's stupid person is, above all, a person who has lost their inner independence to the crowd. The antidote is not isolation from others. It is the cultivation of an inner space where your judgment remains. Finally, your own. Each day, choose one belief you hold strongly and ask yourself honestly, what is the best argument against this? And have I actually engaged with it? Spend deliberate time consuming long-form, slow material, books, essays, lectures that resist the reactive tempo of modern feeds. When you feel the pull of group consensus, name it. Simply noticing I am feeling pressure to agree weakens its grip. Practice disagreeing in low-stakes settings, so the muscle of independent judgment stays active when the stakes are high. Bonhoeffer was executed in April 1945, weeks before the war's end, silenced by the very regime whose collective unthinking he had spent years trying to understand and resist. But the essay survived. The warning survived. And it asks something of us still. Not to be the smartest person in the room, but to be the most awake, to retain, even under pressure, even under comfort, even under the gentle gravity of the crowd, the quiet, unglamorous discipline of thinking for yourself. Stupidity, in his sense, is not a lack of intelligence. It is a lack of presence. And presence is real. Examine. Independent presence may be the simplest and the hardest form of freedom there is.